Hi, this is Christian Busch, author of the Serendipity Mindset. And today on the show, we'll talk about three things. One, how my two brushes with death made it clear to me that life is all about the unexpected and what we do with it. And we'll talk about how you can use that to your advantage. Two, we talk about the serendipity of secret introverts and what we can learn from them, especially when you're introverts. And three, we'll talk about how love, and in my case, babies, come from the most unexpected of places.
Welcome back to part two of our delicious conversation with Dr. Christian Busch. Dr. Christian Busch is the author of the Serendipity Mindset. He is a multi-TEDx speaker. He's on the Thinkers 50 radar list of the 30 thinkers most likely to shape the future. And he is at London School of Economics. He was the co-founder of the Leaders and Purpose Leadership and co-founder of Leaders on Purpose and Sandbox Network. And in the past, in the part one of the show, we talked about a lot to do with what serendipity is. We talked about the science of it. We talked about really examining this idea that it is not so much random. And we've all heard the saying, the harder you work, the luckier you are. But it's a very specific kind of work that Christian gets into in the book, and we spoke a lot about in part one. So if for any reason you didn't hear part one, you've just come in now, I encourage you to go back and listen to part one, because it is absolutely full of real gems, really is. So we're going to jump back in here where we finished off. Before the end of part one, we were talking about what sort of changed the direction for Christian. And he was talking about being 18 years old, having a car accident, the police being totally shocked that he survived, rode off 4 cars, including his own, and that making him to look at himself. I want to sort of start there, sort of pick that thread up, if that's okay, Christian, because as I think you know, I too had a near-death experience. Actually had many, but one dramatic one where I fell off a mountain, got smashed to pieces while free climbing. And oftentimes, in the movie, it's this automatic moment in all the movies. But in truth, it's not. In truth, there is a good deal of self-examination. There's a good deal of disappointing and depressing thoughts about the meaning of your own life. I talk about that there are these moments that are incredibly powerful that change our life, i.e. you crashed or I fell off a mountain. But I always say those are not the moments that changed you. The moments that change us are what, in my belief, not the truth, but in my belief, when things can go back to normal, but we choose something else. And I've seen a lot of people dealing with this in the pandemic, right? They were devastated by the pandemic, and then they thought, I can't wait for it to be over so I can get back to normal. And then they went, you know what? I don't want normal. I don't want to go back there. For you, when you crashed and you went into that sort of dark place, what was the actual turning point? That was the event, but what was the turning point that made you realize I can't go back to what I was?
Yeah, well, that's a great observation. I think in my case, it's been a lot around when you are on a search for meaning, when you try to figure out what is this all about. That was unfair. Like, why would that happen to me? To me, it was a lot around figuring out, if I would run in front of a car again, would it have been worth it? And that has been my guiding thought ever since then. Like, in terms of, if I run in front of a car tomorrow, I want it to have been worth it. And so, I had a near-death experience 2 years ago again with COVID that nearly killed me. And it was the same process again. In the moment, it feels really bad. It's really emotional. It's really kind of like, this kind of system survival type thinking where you're just kind of like trying to survive. There's not a lot of logic. There's not a lot of analytical thinking about oneself, right? It's just literally kind of the survival mode and very primal in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. And then to your point, like over time, as you then reflect and analyze, in my case, I think a lot of this, for example, when I had my second near-death experience now around 2.5 years ago at the outset of COVID here in New York, I very well remember still that one of the things that I realized, I was stuck alone in an apartment in New York and was extremely sick. And it made me realize, wow, I focused so much on passion and purpose and impact and everything else that I completely neglected actually, creating kind of like a beautiful family around me of people who kind of are actually with me in those kind of moments, and that I actually, and vice versa, care for. And so to me, that kind of opened up that potentiality of, no, I really want to be much more aware of, hey, at this point in life, I really want to kind of find someone who really kind of like fits with me. Now, fast forward, there's a lot of things that happen, but I sent an email, a mass email out to people for a kind of random gathering because I've after I was okay again, socially distanced, I suggested a kind of gathering with a couple of friends, rooftop, just kind of randomly to some people. An old friend of mine who I hadn't seen for years and years, I had known her for 13 years. She just went through a terrible divorce, really tough. She went through a lot of like really, really tough things. She kind of like came to that gathering in the end. Long story how that happened. And we met as friends there. And then a week later we would go for dinner and kind of just kind of catch up. And she would say, "Oh well, I met another guy at that house at that dinner gathering, and I'll go on a date with him probably." And so we met as friends over dinner, right? But then over time, and she had this amazing thing and talk about hook strategy. She had made that list in the morning. She was walking on Hudson River and she was reflecting on, what am I looking for in a relationship? Not the kind of like quality of a person, but the quality of the relationship. And so she made a list of things that she was looking for. And so she mentioned that to me. And I was like, well, interesting. Give me that list. Like, I want to know what that list is. And so she read that list after some kind of convincing. She read that list. And it was like, being co-founders in life, having an impact together in the world. Like, and in my mind, it went tick, 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 tick. Like, that's literally the things. And so in my mind, for the first time, I looked at her as like, you know what, actually, this might be kind of like, and so in the evening, over 4 hours, right, as we dove into that conversation, now that we both kind of were a different person than 4 or 5 years ago when we had met before, we kind of after and after, random touches of hands, butterflies. Now she's my wife. We have a baby girl that came from it. And so the very long story short here is that, again, like those moments, to your point, they're inflection points, not in the moment itself. In the moment itself, it's really bad and like emotional. And then over time, the question is, do we do something with it? Is there something that we try to learn from it? And I've always been a big fan of Viktor Frankl for exactly that reason, that he has this beautiful idea, right? That you cannot always choose the situation you're in, but you can always choose your response to it. And so it's always our kind of our agency if we essentially let the situation define ourselves, or if we over time define the situation. And to me, that's been one of the guiding principles that I try to live by. Not always easy, right? In emotional moments, but it's kind of like it gives some agency back, some control back to actually have some kind of.
I fully agree with you. My philosophy is the things that happen to you either define or refine you. Right? And I want them to refine me. I want them to chip away anything that's not true. Although at the time it may feel like I'm pulling off my own flesh, I want it to refine me and polish me. And I can play victim, and we all do, at the moment. But afterwards, I've got to move beyond that. And so I love that you brought that up. So let's go to that for a minute, because what are the underlying sort of features that stop people from being, quote, lucky, that stop us from recognizing the serendipity, that stop us from embracing? I mean, we've talked about that fixed mindset and that niche idea of thinking that locks us in. What are some of the others that really sort of underlyingly block us?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, right? Because there's a lot of strategies we can all use to have more serendipity, right? Simple things like, instead of asking what do you do, asking what do you enjoy doing. Very simple things, but they shift the opportunity space towards actually finding more overlaps. A lot of things we can do in that regard that we can also talk about. But actually, what's really underlying a lot of this is, what are our self-limiting beliefs that we have? Because when you step back and think about those moments in life, for example, where that something positively unexpected could have happened, but it didn't, right? So you were in that meeting and you had that random idea come up, but you didn't bring it up because you didn't feel ready, you didn't feel it was mature enough, or you were in that coffee shop moment and you wanted to speak to that person, but you didn't, right? Those moments where serendipity could have happened, but it didn't, because we didn't feel ready, we had imposter syndrome take over, fear of rejection, you name it. I found it extremely useful to step back and say, when I think about those unexpected moments in my life where serendipity could have happened, but it didn't, what is it that held me back? And then working on that underlying deeper self-limiting belief. So for example, I for a long time had that fear of rejection, right? So essentially, and it's still always a little bit there, right? That like, oh, like if I do X, Y, Z, maybe I get rejected. But actually what helped me a lot was to reframe it away from what's the worst thing that can happen if you do it? So, the sting of rejection that comes from talking with someone who doesn't want to talk with you, the sting of rejection when you go to a speaker at a conference and they don't have time for you, right? These kind of things where it's like, it sucks, right? But then that's kind of like usually a quick sting, right? And you forget about it quickly. What actually I realized is the worst thing is the regret of not having acted on it. The regret of walking out of this meeting and thinking, what could have happened had I brought up this idea? The regret of walking out of this coffee shop and thinking, what could have happened had I spoken with that person? And so that kind of reframing away from what's the worst thing that can happen if I do it to what's the worst thing that can happen if I don't do it, that actually really helped me to soften the blow and say, you know what? I actually rather not have that regret than like this quick sting of rejection that's there. And I think we can all work on those kind of things, right? That hold us back and then kind of like in a way work a little on these underlying self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I want to sort of take this into the, because people might say, well, I'm an introvert. It doesn't work like that for me. Or it's easier for you because you're an extrovert. And I've talked about this before on the show, where people look at me and they go, well, you're an extrovert. It's easy. And I go, actually, I'm not an extrovert. I'm an extroverted introvert. I'm an introvert who trained myself to be extroverted, but I'm still naturally an introvert. And so people say, but you go into social events and you're so comfortable. I'm like, nope, I'm not. I actually have social anxiety. And they're like, really? Like, yeah. And they go, well, how do you do it? And the answer is this. I can not go, and I can stay home and I can watch a Netflix show, or I can hang out with my missus or whatever it is I want to do. Sure. I can sit home and write. Sure. I can do all those things. But what if and this is something I used on myself when I was in my early 20s. What if I meet my new best friend there? And my head, my ego says, you won't. And I go, okay, but what if I do? No, but you won't. All right. And people go, see, that's how it goes in my head. And I go, yeah. And then here's what I say after that. And they go, what? I say, after that, I say, all right, maybe I won't. But what if I meet somebody who could introduce me to my new best friend? You can't deny that possibility. What if I meet somebody who's my new best friend? What if I meet somebody who I really can assist and serve? And for me, not for you, but for me, that's my driver. What if there's somebody in that room whose life will be completely different because of a 3-minute conversation with me? Even if I never meet them again, I have to serve. So you know what? I got to go. Right? And so that's why, and you and I have had this conversation, at the end of my conversation with you, I've said to you, how can I serve you? That's why I say that, because I know the only reason for the conversation that got me to say, well, I should reach out is I got to serve. And it's the thing I use to get me over that hump. And I love that you're pushing people towards that direction, because it's easy to go into the regret. Well, I don't want to feel embarrassed. Yeah, well, I don't either. But what's the bigger calling? What's the regret of not doing it? Well, maybe I could have served that person, and maybe they're struggling with something that I could have really helped them with, even if it was just directing them towards my friend who's a plumber because they're struggling with a leaky roof or whatever it might be. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
That's such an important observation, right? Because I completely relate. I mean, I'm a closet introvert as well. And I actually had that conversation recently with a group of community builders, right, who run kind of global communities. And people always think they're so extroverted, but we are all extreme introverts. But we kind of like, we're passionate introverts, right? We host a dinner and then we hide in the restroom afterwards to replenish our energy, right? But actually, one thing we realized is that if you're hosting things or if you're kind of putting things together, then you can be part of the conversation and you can take yourself out of it and you still stay part of the conversation, right? That's the beautiful thing of actually kind of hosting, bringing people together. That's why a lot of times introverts actually are community builders, right? Because we love actually kind of that idea that we're still there, but also we don't have to always be there. But then also, I'm a big fan that serendipity a lot of times also comes from quiet sources, from calm sources. It comes from reading a book and then thinking, oh my God, that could be a podcast. It comes from taking another street to work and seeing that book in the bookstore and thinking, oh my God, that could be a movie, right? Those kind of things where it can be everywhere. And we can definitely talk about this experiment in a bit about lucky and unlucky people. I always love that because it's so much about how we open our mind to the unexpected, especially also as introverts. But then, there's another piece that I think is really important, which is that as introverts, we can also think about how extroverts actually can be helping us with their superpower. So I'm a big fan, for example, when I go to an event, I go to the event host and I try to get them excited about an idea. When I have a new book, I try to go to the event host and say, hey, this is the idea and so and so. And a lot of times people, when they like the idea, they might then go around the room and talk about the idea, right? Because they have something new to talk about now. And so it's kind of really this thing where if we can, like in a way, quote unquote, in a good way, leverage extroverts to do some of the work in combination with exactly what you said, pushing ourselves from time to time out of the comfort zone, then we have the best of both worlds. And third, I think, something that has helped me a lot always is to think about a couple of questions that feel authentic to me. Like I find it, to me, for example, a very authentic question to ask someone, what do you enjoy doing? For others, this might be asking people after a presentation, what did you find most interesting about the presentation? Whatever it is, just something where we have a couple of questions in mind that whenever we bump into someone or see someone, we can use them. And then actually it can become a joyful situation versus like this kind of small talk thing where we always have to think about, okay, what's the next question? What's the next question? Because it organically evolves around what the other person is interested in. I think that comes to your curiosity point. If we're truly interested in the other person, it becomes easier because if we give them the opportunity to talk about what they're most excited about, that actually then relieves the pressure of, oh my God, we always have to kind of small talk and do that kind of stuff, which anyways is boring. And so I'm a big fan of, especially as an introvert, a lot of the exercise is extremely helpful to make it more joyful whenever you have to be in situations like this. But also you realize every conversation doesn't have to only be a threat to you, but actually it can have a lot of joy and pleasure in there that actually one might also get used to more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. I mean, for me, and this was what came up in our original conversation, was that the key to the serendipity is the willingness to, it's the center of my philosophy, is to be curious, to like feeding into that curiosity. And you and I talked about this. Curiosity is not questions. And people go, well, I don't have to come up with the right question. It's not questions. And they go, what do you mean? I say, questions require answers. And when somebody gives you an answer, somebody's going to be right and somebody's going to be wrong. It's not about that. And they go, well, I said, you're using questions, but it's not about the questions. They go, well, what do you mean? Use the questions to create a deeper understanding. So sometimes the next question is simply, oh, really? Why is that? Tell me more about that. I mean, that's fascinating. It's not actually, oh, I've got to have this list of 42 questions. It's just like, oh, well, so what are you really finding yourself passionate about these days? Well, I'm really finding myself passionate about soccer. Really? That's fascinating. You're an American and you're fascinated by soccer. Why is that? Well, my daughter's playing soccer. Oh, you have kids. Now we're off on a whole different tangent. Right? How old are your kids? Oh, I've got a kid and my kid is 11 years old. Oh, well, one of my grandkids is 11. That's fascinating. Is it a boy or a girl? Oh, it's a girl. Oh, I've got a girl. And there's it's just that willingness to be curious feeds so much of that. And that really leads us into this experiment you talked about, the lucky experiment, which I found pretty fascinating. Walk us through that, because I think people are going to really, it's one of those things where, like I said, if you don't believe in luck, and I'm not a fan of luck in the way that we normally think of luck. I think it's nonsense in the way we normally think of it, but in the way you're talking about it, of course. And by the way, if you want to understand it at an even deeper level, because of my studies, you can look at it through the quantum law of resonance, which is what I speak about. In the quantum law of resonance, you become in resonance with something and it shows up. If I take a tuning fork and it's a D and I ding it, it vibrates at the note of D. if I hold up another one that is set to the note of D, but I don't bang it, it will start to vibrate because this one's vibrating. It's in resonance. It's in synchronicity with it. And it's getting into that synchronistic state, which is what everything you're talking about. So talk to us about the experiment.
Yeah, well, it is fascinating. I mean, what you said also about the kind of asking questions, and that's why I really like your curiosity approach, because Toyota used this really well. The founder of Toyota, where he had that 5 why approach,
5
right? That
whys.
whenever you kind of face a problem, ask why 5 times, because it's usually not what presents itself that the real problem is, right? A good doctor would never, when you say you have a headache, say, oh, great, here's a medication. No, they would try to figure out what's behind that symptom that you tell them. The same, in a relationship, when, probably everyone on this call had at some point the toothbrush fight, right? Where you place a toothbrush somewhere, your partner says, don't put it there, you put it there again, and you get into a fight. It's not about the toothbrush, obviously, right? It's about asking, well, why is it the toothbrush that annoys you so much? And the person might say, well, it's disrespectful that you do that. And then we get to, oh, actually, we can have a much more beautiful relationship, especially also with people we already know well, because we understand their underlying root causes of feelings and other things. So I'm a big fan of the why question, both with people we meet anew, but also with people we know very well, we think, but might actually not, and dive deeper with that. Actually, one of the books on the bookshelf here is The Little Prince, which is one of my favorites because it's always asking why all the time. To your point of the experiment, that really comes to a related point, because it's all about the question of how do we look at the world with open eyes? How do we look at it in an alerted way as the opportunities present themselves? And so in this experiment, and I'd actually love to ask your audience, do you consider yourself to be lucky or unlucky? If you would put yourself on a continuum between luckiness and unluckiness, do you consider yourself to be lucky or unlucky? And the reason I'm asking you this is because if you said you consider yourself to be lucky, you're more likely to be luckier in the future. Not because of some kind of voodoo type thing, right? Like, oh yeah, let's just think of something and it happens. No, it's because you tend to look differently at the world. And so what do I mean with this? There's a lot of different experiments, but I'll tell you one of my favorites, which is they pick people who consider themselves to be very lucky and people who consider themselves to be very unlucky. People who say, I'm always in accidents, bad things tend to happen to me, and so on. And they pick one of each and they say, walk down the street, go into a coffee shop, sit down, have a coffee, and then we'll have our conversation. What they don't tell them is that there's hidden cameras across along the street and inside the coffee shop. There's a £5 note, so money, right in front of the coffee shop door. And inside the coffee shop, one empty seat next to this extremely successful businessman who can make big dreams happen. Now, the lucky person walks down the street, sees the £5 note, picks it up, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits next to the businessman, they have a conversation, exchange business cards, potentially an opportunity coming out of it. We don't know that part. The unlucky person walks down the street, steps over the £5 note, so doesn't see it, goes inside the shop, orders a coffee, sits next to the businessman, ignores the businessman, that's it. Now, at the end of the day, they ask both people, how was your day today? And so the lucky person says, well, it was amazing. I found money in the street, made a new friend, to your point, and potentially a new opportunity coming out of it. The unlucky person just said, well, nothing really happened. And that's, you can have that experiment, a lot of different situations where you can give people the exact same situation and one will have a little bit more luck than the others. I find a lot of money in the street because I expect it to be there. Mostly pennies, unfortunately, so it doesn't really help my lifestyle. But once you look out for it, you tend to see it. So it's really, when you come with this mindset that everywhere you go, if you take another street to work in the morning, there might be something in the bookstore that you see when you walk by. Once you open your eyes to the positively unexpected, then it tends to happen much more often. And so it's really kind of looking at the money in the street. If you don't do that, then you can't see it.
And I remember that experiment, and there was experiments done like that even in the early 70s. And the key is, how do you get lucky? You open your eyes. Okay, but what does that mean? It means you also open your mind. Mm-hmm. It's like, what if, and this is the language I use, what if this is not that? What if this is something else? So what if this, meaning this meeting that I'm going into, or this interview I'm going into right now, is for my position as the head of marketing? I'm making it up, right? But I'm going in and I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to give it my best. But what if this is not that? What if this is something else altogether that I don't know? It might be exactly what it appears to be, but it might be something else. And just that mindset, that framework allows me to go in and do my very best for the interview to get the job as the head of marketing or whatever the job might be. But at the same time, I'm now curious. I'm no longer going in to just impress you with my qualifications. I'm now going in with a curiosity because I'm thinking, well, wonder if this isn't that. How? You know, that's a really beautiful brooch that you're wearing. May I ask you about that? Oh, yeah, it was a gift from my son. Oh, really? What is it from? Oh, it's Celtic. Oh, my goodness. I love Celtic art. I've got a collection of Celtic art. And now we're off on another tangent. Again, trust being transferable. The trust has been up. Yes, I might get the position, but maybe this person says, well, what's your interest in Celtic? Well, I do Celtic art. That's my side gig, and I just love it. May I see some of your art? Yes. You know what? I actually don't want you in marketing, but we would love to market your materials. Boom. You know, it's like that willingness to go in, not, you know, if you don't like the word lucky, and I understand that, if you don't like that, this willingness to say, there's a vaster level of opportunity here that is beyond my fixed mindset. As you said in the experiment, I'm going to the coffee shop to get coffee, to sit down, have the coffee, and then go to my meeting. That's the mindset. The other person is, I'm going to get coffee and I'm going to go to my meeting, and that's fine. But I wonder what will happen along the way. And it's that simple that is mind-blowing. Christian, this has been a delicious conversation. It really has. Thank you so very much. I've loved every minute of it. Thank you. As we come to the close, I want to ask you, is there one piece of practical punch them in the nose that people can take and put into action right away in order to integrate what you're saying? And then I'd love for you to tell us, again, where that people can find out about you and about the book and all the different resources that you have.
Absolutely, and thank you for the great conversation. Also, I've really enjoyed this. I feel there's a, you know, you obviously embody a lot of what we're talking about, so it's wonderful to chat about it. And you know, so one thing, I'm a big fan of really sitting down. You know, we all are in fight or flight a lot of times, but really sitting down for a couple of minutes and thinking about what is it that's truly meaningful to me. If I were to run in front of a car tomorrow, what would I regret not doing? And if it is about, for example, exploring another area where I could potentially build a business or something, then really thinking about how could I, at the end of the day, do something that is low risk. It's not about changing my whole life. It's not about putting myself all out there. It's about doing things, for example, like 90-day experiments, where it's about saying, if I'm working in a bank, but actually I would love to set up my own business for 90 days now, I explore that curiosity by just casting a couple of hooks saying, you know, I've always been interested in medical devices and talking with people. And then there might be unexpectedly this potential co-founder who says, you know what, I already built a business around this. Why don't you join as a co-founder? Let me de-risk it for you. So the point here is that a lot of times then from the most unexpected of places, we can have these beautiful things emerge once we cast hooks based on the things that are truly meaningful to us. And so that's why I'm a big fan of a Serendipity journal, where you write down what is the key themes that are interesting to me at the moment, my key curiosities in a way, and then how do I cast a couple of hooks in almost every conversation that then allow you to have more good luck. To your point, the homepage is serendipitymindset.com, and I'm at Chris Serendipity on Twitter, and on Instagram, I'm at Dr. Christian Bush, and I'm very much looking forward to keeping in touch with everyone.
Thank you so much, Christian. It was a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, excuse me, remember that you can chat about this episode or any past episodes of the Leadership and Loyalty Show. Just go to either Facebook or LinkedIn or one of those places, and you can find us under the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. You can find out more about it right there. And you can hang out with other conscious leaders in chat right there. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know, and I hope that you will do that. I hope that you will share this show with everybody you know. And you know, there's a lot in it. Listen back a couple of times, take some notes. There's a lot for you to take away. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you can use the science of serendipity to create your own luck. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your life, your business, and your leadership impact. And I am out.